Hello there and welcome to the Tyre Kickers. If your kind of clickbait is a Capri up on a ramp, well, this podcast is going to be right down your street.
In this episode, we celebrate the life and lines of the great and recently late Bruno Sacco, the man who made Mercs look modern.
And keeping it Teutonic, we look at the 60s Beamers that saved the company. But what made the cars they call the new class just so classy?
Plus, this is no great surprise, but you don't want classic EVs in your lives anytime soon. Thank you very much. We get your highly charged reaction to our sparky debate.
All that, plus we'll flick through the auctions and classifieds and see what's shifting.
So mirror, signal, and let's crunch it into first as we get moving with episode 19 of the Tyre Kickers. So, since we recorded our last episode, we got the news that one of the greatest car designers of the modern era has departed this mortal coil. Bruno Sacco, the man who made Mercedes look more modern.
Yes, his designs from the late 70s onwards helped turn Mercedes from dated-looking period pieces into sharp-looking modern cars for the new decades of the 80s and 90s. His designs were uniquely his, even if not everybody warmed to them straight away.
So, who was Bruno Sacco? Well, he joined Daimler-Benz in 1958 and rose to become head of the Daimler-Benz Styling Centre in 1975 and stayed there right up until 1999. Before that, he was briefly chief engineer as well. So during his reign, he gave Mercedes-Benz a unique and incredibly successful design and engineering language.
Interesting, though, he wasn't German. He was born in Italy in 1933 and he died last month, aged 90. And his creations were numerous, not just cars either. He designed buses and trucks as well. But with Merc, he knocked out some of his greatest hits. 3 generations of S-Class, the 90s R129 SLs, plus 2 E-Class saloons, the first-gen CLK, as well as a bit of influence on the classic W123 and the 2000s SL.
So let's talk about Bruno's chart toppers. And here's the challenge. Pick a favourite. Now, I'm going to go with, well, I always really love the W201 190, the Baby Benz, a perfect Mercedes answer to the flashier and better handling BMW 3 Series. But, my favourite has to go to the W124 from 1984 to 1997. Why? Well, most people think taxi. They're wrong. Now, when you look at this, the W124 came in a saloon shape, then a coupe, a beautiful estate, and a slightly less beautiful cabriolet. All were pretty good looking though, but that core design language of the W124 looked good in different shapes. How many designs can do that? I can only really think of the 3 Series. Can you think of anything else that spawned 4 shapes?
Yeah, it was a very sort of unifying shape because, as you say, it was almost like the shape was set and then it was stretched to fit the class, wasn't it, in a way? And you've got to give him credit because you look at the Mercedes of the early 70s and apart from the 107 SL, they were starting to look very, very dated, weren't they? And looking very a hangover from the 60s. And he's come along with this fresh language. And I think, as we said, not everybody warmed to his design straight away. And it's debatable whether some of them are a bit dated now and stuck in the past. But you know, as a car designer, you've got to look to the future and you've got to ride the wave. It's like being a fashion designer, I guess, that sometimes you have to put things out that really do shake things up, but are really laser focused to where the demand and the styling is going. I think he was very good at doing that.
And if you think in the 1980s when he was designing, aerodynamics were the next big thing. And so many other designers slipped up. If you look at, say, how Ford went from the beautiful but boxy Cortina, they went to that awful jelly mold Sierra in the 1980s because of aerodynamics to make it slip through the air better. But it looked awful. Chevy did the same. They went from that boxy and beautiful 3rd generation Caprice into the awful upturned bathtub that was the 4th generation Caprice. But Bruno Sacco, he went from the boxy W123 to a really beautiful shape in the W124. It was really slippy. And if you get close up to a W124, almost if you get your hands over it, you can really feel where the edges are tapered. It's got that slight jelly bean shape that was so successful at getting it through the air. I think the drag coefficient was something like 0.3. I've seen several figures bandied around, but around 0.3. And if you look at the current 911, the 992, that's got a drag coefficient of 0.29. So for a design of the 1980s, it was really ahead of its time. It also had multi-link suspension. It's very safe to crash in. Lots of models had ABS. It had that magic windscreen wiper. Do you remember seeing that? That kind of flung its arm out to the corners of the windscreen.
Oh, yeah.
it was a really, really clever car. There's also these really fast versions, the 500e that was made by Porsche. Harry's Garage did a really good video of that recently. And then there was the AMG Hammer version with the 80s body kit and the big 5.6 litre V8. But I think the highest accolade is high mileages. As taxis, as mentioning there were taxis, one in Norway had over 2 million miles. There was a German 200D with a really slow 75 horsepower engine. So that would have been a very, very slow 800,000 miles on the odometer. And a Portuguese one did 1.2 million miles. It's pretty impressive.
For me, I don't think it's not my favourite sort of era of Mercedes design. But I come back to the thing that the guy was forward thinking. His designs were forward thinking. And bottom line, as a car designer, the most successful car designers are the ones who sold the most. That was their job, wasn't it? There was no point having a great design that didn't sell. You needed to see where the market was and give the public something that they wanted to buy, both aesthetically and something they want. And he did that because those cars sold in massive numbers, didn't they?
Yeah, they were huge. And also, I think, a bit like the Range Rover defined the SUV segment, I think with the W124, he defined both the taxi segment and also really classy looking cars. Now, being Tyre Kickers, obviously, we have a chance to buy one. So here's my pick of the UK classifieds. And this is what was so good about his designs. The W124 Estate was the ultimate stealth wealth lifestyle accessory. So it was both a taxi and a very trendy thing to be seen in. Now, here's one for sale at the moment. If you look on your screen, it's a 1995 late E320 4-speed right-hand drive in Watford. Stealth wealth, super classy, and just £3,300. So you can buy a bit of Bruno Sacco, probably his finest design, for just a touch over £3,000. What do you think of that?
This one's just come back from a Gymkhana, I think, hasn't it? But these were either the rich London middle-class taxis, weren't they, to ferry the kids around, or they're out in the countryside doing Gymkhanas and pony treks and that sort of stuff. But when you look into this, I mean, it's that old cliche about Mercedes. This was when the engineers and the designers made Mercedes, not the accountants. And you can see, I mean, it's a lot of car for the money, to use another cliche, but it's a solid design. And it yes, it has dated, but it still looks solid and tank-like, doesn't it? And to be honest, it looks like you just fill it up and drive it.
Yeah, unfortunately, that windscreen wiper I was talking about looks a bit stuck halfway up the windscreen, but it's £3,000. It's tiny detail, isn't it? At least you can see through the windscreen. I think they're a really classy buy, and it's cheap, and you really are buying an icon. I mean, I love the W124. I get a feeling you're slightly less keen on some of his designs.
Yeah, I'm just slightly distracted. Before we get into that, there's some wheels in the back seat.
Yeah, there's some extra wheels.
And there's also a rather suspicious lump under the tonneau cover at the back in the boot. I don't know whether that's maybe a dead horse or
maybe another wheel.
The last owner, perhaps. But it's
I've also just noticed as well, if you look on picture 13, the rear wiper has actually fallen beyond the window onto the bodywork. So, you get a bit of bodywork wiped as well at the same time.
Well, that was getting the dead body in the back. I think it obviously knocked it. But yeah, I'm not wild about certainly the 129. I mean, this sort of thing's all right. The 129, the 90s SL, just because, as we've spoken about in the past, 90s car design and me don't really get on. It's not really an era, a decade that I get very excited about. I think it all went to pot really in the 90s. He did design the CLK and the SLK, which I think were two great designs. The early ones, which he was involved with before he left, are good, iconic cars. I think they evolved into something better in terms of lines, but he was the guy that started those off. And you look how popular the SLKs and the CLKs were. They were massively popular and really good-looking cars. You've got to think of Sacco as more like an industrial designer, I suppose. He designed the products that were fit for purpose, that fitted the needs of the people at the time, but were also forward-looking and made people want them.
I think for German taxi drivers and for Sloane Rangers, we need to say a great big thank you to Bruno and rest in peace. Thanks for the cars. There'll be a legacy for him for a long, long time.
Well, you're listening to episode 19 of the Tyre Kickers. Good to have you along. And looking out the window, it's a reminder it's mid-October as we're recording this, and the nights are drawing in. And it is, Max, starting to get cold as well as rainy, rather than just rainy. You've obviously bought a convertible.
Just in time.
In time. Have you had the roof down much since you bought it?
I love it. I mean, because it's a Merc of the 1980s, the heating is nuclear. I measure it in half-life, not in temperature. And you can have really, really hot feet. So I've been out a few times in a big jacket and a hat, and I really like it. I mean, I love going outside in the cold in a convertible. It's kind of what they're made for. It's what stupid things that us Brits do, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you've got it sorted. As we've spoken about in the last episode, my heater doesn't really work in my car, so the novelty is wearing off for me now. It's getting cold, and I took it out since we last spoke. I took it out on a cold day. It was nice and sunny, but it was cold, and I got to the point where I just thought, if it wasn't sunny, I've lost interest. In fact, it got cloudy in a couple of bits, and I just thought, right, that's it. I'm done with classic cars for this year.
Leg it home.
Yeah, exactly that. I think you've got a sort of late 80s one, so I think you get the best of both worlds in that, because you do get a relatively modern car with a heater that works, and a relatively reliable car, and you can enjoy it kind of all weather. So you're better off, apart from the salt on the road, you could probably run that all winter, can't you?
That's kind of the plan. As soon as the salt comes out, the car goes away, because they've got such a reputation for rusting. And that I do think with the roof up, it's quite good as well. So you do have that get out of jail card. But yeah, with the heater on, it's a great feeling.
Yeah, my 60s one, putting the roof up in mine is like trying to put one of those gazebos up that all comes in bits.
In the wind.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't just go up with one hand like a sort of pram cover. You have to get out, and you have to put in two bars that go across. So you have to walk around the car. You have to walk around the car about 10 times to put it up. And then when it's on, it's only a thin little vinyl thing. And then, I don't know. For me, I notice how crap classic cars are when it's cloudy. When it's sunny and it's warm, I don't care, because I'm just enjoying the rasp of the exhaust. I'm enjoying the, the burble of the engine. I'm enjoying the experience. When you got the hood up, a crappy old vinyl hood, and it's cold and the heater doesn't work and you're stuck in traffic, I'm done then. Thanks very much, I'm out. Anyway, I'm rambling. There is a point in the story which you'll be delighted to hear. It's coming. So sat waiting for the lights to change, and coming in the opposite direction, wafting down the road, a 60s Mercedes 108 light blue, just it just effortlessly, like a swan, coming down towards me, and I was getting to be jealous. Actually, I thought, oh God, that's what I want. It's set me off again, I think. So I started looking at car and classic.
Got bad news. You're not cool enough. You're not cool enough to drive one of those. You need to be an architect, rude. And you need to have a roll top sweater. You're not cool enough.
Oh, thanks very much. Anyway, right, you finish off the podcast. I'm off. I've never been so insulted. Well, I have. I did the one with you last podcast.
That's true.
With you.
Yeah, last podcast was pretty insulting.
No, so I do fancy that. I think my car's got to go away, I think, for the winter. I'll just wait for sunny days. I'm done with it for this year, which is a shame. Despite the weather, actually, it has been a good year. I have used the car quite a lot, so that's good. And it's run up some miles. It's probably run 500 or 600 miles up, so that's good.
The Tyre Kickers with Max and Matt.
Yep, as the BGs say there, this is the Tyre Kickers, episode 19. And Max, we've got the awards coming up soon.
Yes, we are finalists at the Independent Podcast Awards. Any chance of winning?
Not sure. I did have a look. There are a few good ones we're up against, but I think we're doing something slightly different from them. I mean, we're not. Most podcasts seem to be just around an interview format. So the fact we're having a bit of banter and talking about different things might
badly,
might badly, yeah. But with the help of editing, it makes us look like we know what we're doing. We'll see. We'll report back.
Also, don't forget, we're only a month away from doing this show live at the Classic Motor Show at the NEC. We'll be talking nonsense and recording it at 3 p.m. on the Saturday of that weekend. If you're coming, come along, see how we throw this shambles together and see how much editing goes into making us sound like we know what we're doing.
Yeah, don't heckle, please, because this is a bit out of our comfort zone. So we don't get off your shit. Just be nice to us. We might have to bring a support animal or something to stroke. A
chaperone.
Exactly that. But hopefully it'll be a bit of fun. We'd love to meet you. If you need tickets, we've got a promo code, haven't we, Max?
Yeah, it's called Tyre Kickers 3 if you need a couple of quid off. I'm not generalising. It's actually £2 off if you use the promo code Tyre Kickers 3. That's for advanced tickets, not for ones on the door. So go to the Classic Motor Show website and type in that promo code.
We'll be there 3 o'clock on the Saturday. That's November the 9th. They've got this thing called the Podcast Lounge to come see us perform like animals on the stage.
Monkeys.
Okay, moving on. Let's catch up on what you've been telling us.
And that's largely this. You hate electric classics. Strong words, but strong reaction to our feature on the last episode asking if we should swap out engines and turn classics electric.
Yes, we argued the case for and against, and I can see the merits, but it's fair to say you've all come down on the side of not
You're
feeling
the
it
only
at all.
one.
It's just me on my own, just charging in the corner. Let's kick it off. Listener Collecting Classics UK on Instagram answers the question of, do you want electric classics, by saying this, very short and sweet, hell no, and I cannot stress that enough.
Universal classic car ads, don't get me started.
350 Munro isn't a fan either. He says, never. I work on EVs and I absolutely despise them.
On Boro Alpha is a bit more optimistic with a yes, but not today.
Mr. Doberbenz on Instagram, he says, I'm not a fan. The EV is the equivalent of microwave cooking, whereas the combustion engine is haute cuisine.
And we've stressed out Sam at Southern Cars UK. She says, I was all relaxed after a Sunday afternoon burbling around in my 928. Cool. And then you start talking about electric classics. Now I'm feeling quite tense and upset.
A few more of you have given us your reasoning on this, so a bit more thought out. Felix Hammer says he's got a Citroen DS, and he said, it made me think about the things I really love about the DS. And honestly, one of them is the personality of the car and the engine. Needing to run it a bit before I take it out, all the whirs and the hisses and the noises it makes, it all just comes together to give the car a personality and something which electric cars just don't do.
Exactly. Fleming Motor Sales also isn't a fan. He says it takes away from the whole experience and character of classic cars. The sound, the smell, and the way the power is delivered, the turning of the ignition key, firing the engine into life, slowly pushing the choke back in once the engine's warmed up. I enjoy part of the whole experience rather than just flicking a switch and moving off in silence.
Mark Dempsey thinks we need to celebrate the differences between classic cars and EVs, especially as time moves on. He says, when nearly everything you see day to day will become electric, classic cars and their sound, their smell, etc., will become even more special. They are so magical now, so imagine what they'll be like in the future. People will long for the old days.
Right now I'm on to page 17 of the responses. Ben's 1954 Sapphire on Insta is more worried about the division it might cause. At the end of the day, it's a community of enthusiasts. Why are people looking to divide that? Go ahead and do what you like, but you don't have to be team electric or team petrol.
As things move on, though, if we start to go down this direction, Chris Hayward asks a hypothetical question, Max. He says, will a classic car with a modern electric motor still be eligible to attend classic car shows?
It's going to be a separate picket fence, isn't it, around them, I'm guessing. They won't be allowed to mix in with other people. You park over there.
Well, I think it's already happening, to be honest. I've been at shows where people turn up in electric cars and, you know, they get a bit of interest, and don't make them park outside. It's not that bad. I think this is more of a subtle dig at us trying to slice up the type of classics a couple of shows ago. But most classic car meets, you meet with the bonnet down, don't you? Although when I've seen people say it's electric, it's like stop, and then the muttering starts. But thank you for all your comments. But I've got to say, it's probably one of the most contentious things we've talked about, isn't it?
I think electric classics, it's a dividing line, and I'm not sure it's going to get any better.
Well, thank you for your sparky reactions to this. This is a topic that's going to be highly charged for years to come, I reckon.
Oh, well done. You've spent some time writing those puns, haven't you? Up to 30 seconds.
Puns are us.
The Tyre Kickers. With Max and Matt.
Still to come, we talk about the 60s Beamers that saved the company. But first, a bit of auction stalking.
Yes, you know, on this show, we like to kick the tyres at the auctions and keep an eye on how good the market is doing, see what's selling and what's stalling.
So let's have a quick look at the results from one of the best auction locations of the calendar. No, Max, not a tent in a field or an oily warehouse for this particular sale. Instead, we're talking the H&H sale at the Imperial War Museum at Duxford up in Cambridgeshire. Good location and a good car to kick us off. Have a look at this. 1965 Sunbeam Tiger Mark I. This is the Pocket Rocket. The one that we've done a bonus episode on. You can scroll back and listen to that if you like. But this is the Sunbeam Alpine, essentially, that got hot-rodded by the Cobra man, Carroll Shelby, and ran for only a few years, really. There was only a few thousand of these made, so they're always interesting cars. They hold their value really well. This one, though, only sold for just under $26,000, including the buyer's premium. That's good value for a Sunbeam Tiger. Do they float your boat, Max?
It is nice. For some reason, it's got the black and white number plate on, which is wrong, and it's got mini lights on, which I don't really like. And also, it's got the wrong engine, isn't it?
Yes, it's not the original engine, which may have affected value. It's the slightly larger V8, the Ford V8 that got put in. So there's a bit in the blurb actually saying that the vendor was aware of this and decided to uprate the sports car dynamics. So he's sorted the suspension out and the rear axle. It does say it's had £10,000 spent on it, uprating the drivetrain and electric. So at 26 grand, that's a great buy.
I'm going to draw your attention here to a car from 1953, a Bristol 401. Now, I don't know much about these, to be honest, but they are beautiful looking cars. It's got that teardrop aerodynamic shape, and it's only one of 618 Bristol 401s owned by somebody called Derek Cunningham, who apparently was a flamboyant, what does that mean, Hollywood writer, director, and actor. But if you look at his car, what a great choice. I mean, in 1953, these must have stood out so much on the street because they're so beautiful. Look at that lovely tapered back. 6-cylinder, 2-litre engine. I think it was meant to go up to 100 miles an hour, apparently. I think that's a really beautiful car. Hammer price was $38,250. But what a great car you get for that. Bristol's, I think, are really underappreciated, but it's such a beautiful car. Lovely interior as well.
Yeah, to describe it, it looks like it's been designed in an air tunnel. I was going to ask you actually if Bristol had a history of being an airplane manufacturer, but I looked in the blurb here, and yes, they do. They're a Bristol airplane company. It just has that look of aeronautics about it, and they're saying they used the superleggera, the super light technique, to give it a really lightweight. It looks really classy, that, and very different to a lot of stuff, actually. Look at it inside profile. Look at that picture, number 3, inside profile. It just looks like an aeroplane wing, doesn't it? It's beautiful. I think that'd be a really, really good choice. I mean, the price is a little bit high, $38,250. Would you spend that on that?
I think if you're in the market for one, and the fact there's only 600 of them, to be honest, is pretty convincing. I don't know how many of those are left, but what a great car. And it's so different from everything else. Look at that dashboard. It's got beautiful wood veneer on it, some fantastic they're almost kind of Art Deco stroke aircraft style instruments. It's just a great looking, different classic car. You're unlikely to see another one at a show, and I think they're a very, very cool design. I think that's quite a good buy, to be honest, for less than 40,000.
Really interesting. From every angle, it looks good, doesn't it? Like a 3/4 looks great. It's just a really, really interesting car. I've never seen one of these before.
But not as beautiful as this next car I'm going to bring you to. Look at this, a 1994 Mercedes-Benz E320 W124. Only fresh are we from talking about these. There's a fantastic example up for £4,000. $4,725 was the hammer price. And this is a sport line. So the sport line is just so much better than the standard W124 saloon. It's such a nice looking car.
We've just paid tribute to Bruno Sacco, who designed these cars, so I've got to be respectful of that. But what is it with you with like old washed up 90s
old
Mercs?
Man's Mercs? What could that be? Could I be an old man, for example?
Well, it's just like it's not an exciting car, Max. What is
it is. Sportline's got the lower ride height with the stiffer springs, anti-roll bars, and they got dampers. The wheels were 7-inch wide. I think the standard was 6.5 inches wide on the W124. It just drove like a sports car. I think the Sportline are great.
It looks like a middle management car. And as we both know, you didn't get to middle management in your career.
Still aspire to it.
All those things you've just listed off of like an Alan Partridge list of why my boxy saloon is better than yours.
The E320, this was the peak of W124. And as I've blared on in this episode already enough, I really like the 124. This is the best one you can get. I think somebody's got a steal there. £4,725. Lucky person.
Well, it's hard to believe now, but back in the late 50s, BMW was in a really bad way. Their slightly kooky mix of tiny and luxury cars they were selling then just weren't shifting, and they were in big trouble.
They'd gambled billions of borrowed Deutschmarks, and the Bavarians were in danger of going bust.
So they needed a new plan, and more importantly, a new class of car. The result was the Michelotti-designed 700, which turned the corner for BMW and heralded the arrival of what they dubbed the Neue Klasse, or new class of car.
Now, these new classes had independent rear suspension and front disc brakes and started the BMW trend of making drivers' cars to differentiate themselves from Mercedes-Benz. They sold, so BMW were saved. Now, I was at Coffee and Classics at the Motor Hub in Byberry a couple of weeks ago, and I saw one in the flesh. I've never seen one before. Then obviously I sprinted home, got on the internet, well, ambled home, and then I found a super rare right-hand drive 1972-2000 new class saloon for sale. Have a look at this. I had never seen one before this, and then I found a right-hand drive one for sale. It's so rare, but it's such an interesting shape. If you have a look at it, you can see the design language for BMWs all for the future. It's got the Hofmeister kink. It's got the shark nose. It's not, I would say, a particularly pretty car, but it's a very significant one in that it established the BMWs as both drivers' cars and as aggressive-looking cars, because the design cues they used on these new class cars went all the way through, to the 1990s, really, when you think of the shark-nosed BMWs, and the Hofmeister kink is still there now.
I didn't think I'd learn anything from speaking to you ever.
And you still haven't. You're still waiting.
Every day's a school day. I mean, I didn't know that BMW was in such a mess, and this sort of new breed of car came out of it. I didn't really have much of a knowledge of BMW before these type of cars. And if you look at the shape of this one, it is very much like the sort of 1602 and a 2002 that followed, isn't it?
And what BMW did with the new class is make them actually interesting to drive. So if you fancied yourself as a bit of a driver, you could get behind the saloon car and still have good fun. And if you look at the interior, it's so minimalist, it's fantastic. So the interior design of BMW was kind of created alongside the exterior design. So they made it driver focused and they made it looking good. I mean, this one in particular is nice. It's been ruined by the worst pair of wing mirrors I've ever seen mounted on a car. They're mounted right at the front of the bonnet, so it looks like Dame Edna's glasses. But I think the car design, when you look at it side on, is really quite effective. I wouldn't say it's pretty. It's certainly a purposeful looking car. And I think this particular 1972 one is so important because it made a saloon an interesting car to drive again. Previously in the 60s, saloon cars weren't that great unless you went to the top end, the luxury Mercedes and Jags and stuff. The average saloon car, the Cortinas, were pretty boring. So this was something quite exciting.
You bought a saloon car through necessity, didn't you, before then? You didn't buy it for fun. You bought it because you needed the seats and you needed to get people in it. And it's just what you needed. If you wanted fun, you got a sports car. Whereas BMW was the first of probably the main manufacturers that were able to combine the two and gave you a sporting saloon. So the fact that this design was so bang on and the driving experience was bang on was really set the standard and put the road ahead for them to conquer that market in the 70s, the 80s and the 90s and forward. I mean, BMW is still thought about as a driver's car. You know, they always focused it as being the ultimate driving machine. The rear-wheel drive cars went. You remember a lot of cars went front-wheel drive, didn't they? BMW stuck to their guns and stuck to rear-wheel drive.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about a lot of interesting design-led cars. You know, the Mercs, the Bristol 401, and now this new Class 2000 from 1972. I think there's three cars there that if you're into your design, I think they're great classic cars for you because you're driving something that had an effect on the whole market for the next 30, 40, 50 years in the case of this BMW.
I think that's cool. How do you feel about that over a 2002? I mean, they're very, very expensive now, 2002s, but like a 1602. I mean, this one is, did you mention the price, 18,995?
I think that's quite cheap, actually, for a slice of history. In the 2002, you know, it's quite, how can I say this? It's a bit cliched, isn't it? Again, if you're your junior architect and you want to look cool, you get a 2002. I think this really sets you out as a car connoisseur. If you turn up to a car show in that, you're going to be the only one. And I think that's quite exciting because you are investing in a story, the story of BMW.
Yeah, it's an interesting car and an interesting story, and my hats off to you. As I say, I didn't realise that you were such a good teacher in terms of car history. I've learned something from you. I think it might be the last thing I learned from you, but it's always a bonus, I think. So thank you for the lesson.
In order to learn, first you have to listen.
Pardon?
So that's it for this episode. Hopefully, by getting to this point, you haven't been too offended by the comments on the fourth generation Chevy Caprice.
And if you've actually enjoyed this, then please can you rate us on Apple Podcasts? It helps show the techie nerds at Apple that we're cool, sort of. Apparently not very cool, according to Max. But it also really helps boost the show. So if you can go on Apple Podcasts now, give us a 5-star review. Thank you very much.
Next time, we're back to celebrate 20. Yes, 20 episodes of this nonsense. But in the meantime, we're off to the awards to see if we're winners or just a pair of losers.
Fingers crossed. So until the 20th show, enjoy your classics and see you then.
Bye.
Yes, his designs from the late 70s onwards helped turn Mercedes cars from dated-looking period pieces into sharp, modern-looking cars, for the sake.
Well, this is going well, isn't
Just
it?
read it. Stop ad-libbing. All right.